Let's move on to some business news for you on the programme. Asian markets, they've mostly been rising as investors track a rally on Wall Street. Investors growing increasingly confident that Joe Biden and the Democrats will win the White House and both houses of Congress, paving the way for that huge new stimulus plan. Broad expectations as well that whoever wins, there will still be a stimulus package. As you can see, there's just a bit of a drop on the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. Now, this year, as many as 115 million people could find themselves pushed into extreme poverty as a result of the economic impact of the pandemic. That stark warning coming from the World Bank after decades of progress in improving living standards around the world. Well, earlier, our business editor, Kate Moody, spoke to the lead author of that report about the demographics that have been hardest hit in the pandemic.
One of the findings that I think we put forward in the report is the fact that these new poor look a little bit different from the existing poor or those that were poor before the COVID pandemic and the economic crisis hit. And how are they different? Well, what we see is that they are relatively more educated than the existing poor. They tend to live in urban areas as opposed to the extreme poor or the chronic poor who are more likely to live in rural areas. And they tend to be employed in the informal sector, particularly in services and construction. And this has important implications for how we think about responding to the impacts of the crisis. And it calls for governments to think about ways in which policies have to be adapted to respond to both the needs of the existing poor and now these new poor who have a different profile.
Well, many of the new poor will be in Latin America, where the virus has battered not only low-income residents, but also the middle classes. Claire Marsh has more for us.
Extreme poverty exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic. Although the virus arrived late in Latin America, it now accounts for 5 of the top 10 countries in the world for COVID-19 cases. Some 34 million people have already lost their jobs, according to the UN's Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And nearly 20% of the region's businesses, some 2.7 million, are expected to permanently close due to the pandemic, including this clothing store in the Peruvian capital, Lima. Before the outbreak, the owner was comfortably middle class, but now her family is teetering on the edge of poverty.
El momento más duro fue el darme cuenta de que la mensualidad de mi hija no la podía pagar. El pensar que cambiarla a un colegio estatal, ese cambio, el no poder solventar los gastos de la comida o los pagos de los servicios.
Many economists say the crisis has exposed Latin America's long-standing weaknesses. Its reliance on low productivity sectors, such as mining and agriculture, its high number of informal workers, and its failure to build effective tax systems. Some 58% of Latin American workers are in the informal sector. The UN now estimates the region will see its economy contract by more than 9% this year, potentially pushing 52 million of its residents into poverty, with indigenous groups and women especially hard hit.